Hi everyone, you're listening to The Party Line, a podcast from The Ditch, news and comment from Ireland on theditch.com. I'm Niamh Bhriain.
And I'm Paulie Doyle, filling in for Harry Browne this week, who is in Jersey visiting some family. So you're stuck with me during his absence. Please follow The Ditch on social media and listen to The Party Line anywhere you get your podcasts. Niamh, how you doing? It's good to be with you.
Grand.
How are things?
Good to be here too. Today's going to be a bit of a neutrality episode, I think.
Yes, but before we get into anything, I have to ask you now. You had an interesting experience last night where you ended up on The Tonight Show to discuss neutrality, the triple lock, and a variety of other things. And tell me how that went. I'm dying to hear about it.
Yeah, I was on The Tonight Show last night. I mean, it was great. I was really happy to be asked on because, there's a gap or there's an absence of, I suppose, voices that speak out in favour of neutrality, in favour of protecting the triple lock, with evidence-based research and facts about why we should keep the triple lock in place, why we need to strengthen our neutrality. We don't usually hear from people who have those views on mainstream media. So I was delighted to be asked on to the Tonight Show. I was on a panel with Minister Thomas Byrne, who's the Minister of State for European Affairs and Defence, and Sinn Féin's Mairead Farrell. So it was the three of us. And it was Shane Coleman who was chairing or hosting the discussion.
I had to pinch myself. It was actually, I was like, oh, there are some people people on this panel who are actually advocates of neutrality, want to strengthen it, want to, fortify it, as opposed to the usual kind of experts that we see rolled out time and time again from institutions or institutes or think tanks, which may or may not get funding from vested interests, the European Commission and so on. So it's refreshing.
Yeah, and I suppose it was also an opportunity. Like, for example, we've spoken on the podcast a good bit about Operation Irini and why Ireland had to leave Operation Irini, because it now focuses on the Russian shadow fleet.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas again last night on The Tonight Show, when Thomas Byrne, the minister, he spoke first, he mentioned the withdrawal from Irini, but he didn't actually mention the focus on Russia. So I thought it was really important then to actually focus my intervention on that, because I don't honestly think that particular dimension of why we've left Operation Irini, I don't think it was actually covered anywhere on mainstream media. I certainly didn't see it.
Yeah.
So it was great to have the opportunity to speak on live TV, putting those views forward. I haven't really checked social media. I'm not really on social media, so I'm not really sure what the response was.
Oh, well, friend of the show, Dan O'Brien, has accused you of rattling off Kremlin talking points. I mean, calling for more, calling for the general public to maybe have a say in neutrality, or the
talking points.
Yeah, it's a great calling for more participation of the public in democracy is a Kremlin talking point, apparently.
Oh, interesting. Okay, you see, I'm not really on. I don't really check these things, and I think I would specifically not check if I were to be in the media. I would prefer to not have a look at it. So I actually haven't. I haven't seen any of that. That's interesting. Okay, maybe there would be more of that during the day then, because it was only last night.
Yeah,
that it happened, but
let's see.
Yeah, no, but I think fair play to the Tonight Show for having me on. I was delighted, and
yeah, fair play.
Hopefully I'll get on again. And I really enjoyed actually putting my points to the minister, because there's an awful lot that he has to answer for.
Yeah.
I think what we were going to do in our media section, we were going to talk about the Fianna Fáil stuff. So I don't know, do we want to go into that now and then we come back around to the ditch?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah?
That
okay.
Makes sense.
So we're going to go, we'll throw everything on the air and we will go first. We'll go first to the Fianna Fáil stuff.
Yeah, sure.
So I suppose maybe the prelude to having the Tonight Show discussion last night on the triple lock and on neutrality was actually because there had been stories over the weekend that there were a group of people within Fianna Fáil that were actually dissenting, and they were calling on the Fianna Fáil party, on the Taoiseach Micheál Martin, to have a proper discussion on what's actually at stake if the triple lock goes, because they were saying, and they sent a letter, which some of which has been published on RTE
And
and
that's
in the
people like
Irish
Willie
Times.
O'D, who was a former defence minister himself.
Yeah,
So it's
exactly.
senior
So
enough people in the
so it's
party who are
not
dissenting.
kind of a minor. It's somebody who's a former defence minister, Willie O'D, who held the brief himself a number of years back, and a number of others. The names, there's been speculation about some of the names in the media. We haven't seen the letter, but basically it is yet again kind of another crack appearing, I suppose, in what the government is trying to get over the line in terms of getting rid of the triple lock. And I suppose a few of the things that came out in the Fianna Fáil letter was that there's been no discussion. It's just being pushed through, and I suppose there was a sense that there's very little difference now between Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, and that neutrality was always something that Fianna Fáilers would have kind of, the legacy of De Valera, the legacy of Frank Aiken,
Sure.
and kind of this sense now that the Thomas Byrnes or the Micheál Martins of the party have kind of eroded the identity of Fianna Fáilers in a way, and they're just kind of now all the same. And I think this is an attempt to appeal to probably the party base. Like, we've seen a number of county councils and city councils around the country, including most recently Cork City Council, which is Micheál Martin's own constituency, voting in favour of resolutions that call for the protection of the triple lock and neutrality. And in those councils, we've seen a number of Fianna Fáilers voting in favour of neutrality, in favour of the triple lock. So there's a divide, I suppose, between the top echelons of the Fianna Fáil party, so that being the Taoiseach, Minister Thomas Byrne, and then, the backbenchers and the councillors and the Fianna Fáil, or the base, I suppose, of the party.
Yeah, and there's also, there's a real, there is that disconnect between people on the local level and people who are more senior in the party. And then there's also this kind of, you might call it democratic deficit. The public hasn't been consulted at all. Micheál Martin, I think it was in 2022, suggested that we should have a citizens' assembly on neutrality and issues associated with it. We've talked about this before on the show. That never happened. Instead, we got the consultative forum, which was stacked with NATO-friendly, sometimes people directly employed by NATO, various experts, the kinds of experts actually that you might typically see rolled out onto panel shows to discuss why we need to get rid of the triple lock. That came to the conclusion that the government wanted, which is that this is something that needs to go. But there was no meaningful discussion, and I think that's because Micheál Martin and others know that if the public had any say in this whatsoever, the government would be stopping its tracks in terms of what it's trying to achieve here.
Yeah, and I suppose just in terms of it being stopped in its tracks, so last night there was the Fianna Fáil Parliamentary Party meeting, and that's where there was a discussion on the triple lock. Now, we don't know what happened. It was a closed meeting. We don't know about the content of that meeting, but we do know this morning that the Irish Times have reported, so this morning being Wednesday morning, the Irish Times have reported that Micheál Martin announced, I think at that meeting, that they won't actually be pushing through the triple lock legislation before the summer recess, which is what they had said they would do. So the plan was that they would put it through before the summer recess. It would be in place during the European Union presidency, that Irish troops could basically deploy to any mission anywhere they wanted. And yeah, I suppose the fact that they've now had to kick that down the road and they won't come back to it until until autumn. I suppose it is a sign that they are under pressure. It isn't that easy to revoke a piece of legislation when you have the vast majority of people in favour of neutrality and there's continuously more and more noise. People are getting, they're getting wind of the fact that the government is actually moving forward with plans like we discussed on the Tonight Show last night, and we've talked about with Irene. If it weren't for the triple lock, we would now have Irish troops on an European Union military mission in the Mediterranean that is directly confronting Russian ships.
Mm-hmm.
That's the reality if we didn't have the triple lock.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether to call it a win for the neutrality movement or not. The fact that it's been postponed, it hasn't been enacted, which is what they
Sure.
had hoped. But yeah, I suppose there's a lot of things happening around neutrality at the moment, and the European Union presidency, which is due to kick off on the 1st of July, so in just over 2 weeks. Sorry,
God.
under 2 weeks from now.
It's
Yeah,
it's perverse as well that this is all being done against public opinion in the name of sovereignty, when in fact something like the triple lock prevents us actually from being bullied into sending troops abroad outside of the framework of international law. At least at the moment,
Yeah.
if the US were to exert pressure on the state and say, we want you to send troops wherever, perhaps somewhere in the Middle East, there's a mechanism in place that allows the government to turn around to someone like Trump, who we all know they're so scared of, and say, actually, legally, we can't do that. It's not possible for
Yeah.
us to do what you want us to do.
exactly.
Whereas the triple lock we're not going to have that protection
Yeah.
if the state has its way.
Yeah, oh, they're shooting themselves in the foot, and we all know how susceptible they are to pressure, like the Occupied Territories Bill being the perfect example of that.
But this is the other thing as well. It's like, these Russian ships in international waters are this absolutely unacceptable violation of the modicum of sovereignty that we have. But if Washington says you're not allowed to enact legislation that's supported by the general public and has passed through the Shannon and the Dáil, well, then that's just the cost of doing business, and we need to be mindful of not upsetting these people. It's perverse.
Yeah, oh, totally. I'm just thinking we should come back now. We should come back now to the ditch media and
Okay.
then introduce because this episode, just for our listeners, this episode will actually have a pre-recorded segment from a People's Forum on peace and neutrality. So maybe we come back to the ditch segment now, and then we go back to our discussion on neutrality to introduce the People's Forum. Does that sound like a plan?
Sounds like a plan.
Okay, so Paulie, I should have asked you 15 minutes ago when we started. Tell me what's in the ditch this week.
And now for something completely different. Well, in the ditch, we like to do from time to time stories about property, stories about development, stories about zoning. And something that's observable when you're doing these stories is as you begin to look west, further and further west, the people that you're reporting on become increasingly, what's the word I'm looking for, slippery, right?
Right. Good word. I'm from very far west, so go with slippery.
And that's true of some of the stuff. We've done some reporting on kind of planning and development in County Sligo.
Okay.
So the story that we did recently concerned a guy called Cathal O'Connor. Now, people may be familiar with that name. He's a property developer based out in Sligo, CEO of a company called Belvedere Homes.
Okay.
And his name was in the national press recently because he pled guilty to assaulting teenage boys who had broken into a premises, him and another man, and they beat them up quite badly, threatened to cut off their arms, threatened to break their legs, like pretty vicious stuff. He's been handed a prison sentence, but a couple of years ago, there was like a very controversial vote to rezone a lot of land as part including the Sligo development plan in favor of property developers, people like Cathal O'Connor, against the recommendation of the Office of the Planning Regulator and against the recommendations of the chief executive, who said this isn't sustainable development. It's not. You have to do this right. We've done quite a bit of reporting on that and some of the politicians who were involved in kind of furthering this guy's interests, but we also got our hands on some correspondence between O'Connor and the chief executive of Sligo County Council.
Okay.
And over the course of about 18 months, O'Connor was back and forth with him. I felt really bad for the chief executive, actually, because O'Connor was being like extremely aggressive towards him, trying to get him to agree
like
to these
bullying tactics. Okay.
He's saying you put a knife in the back of Sligo. He's saying, he's
from Sligo, this man?
Yeah, Cole, yeah. I think so. Yeah, I believe so. He's certainly based there.
Yeah.
He certainly has a lot of business there.
Okay.
And, you know, there are all these different rounds that a county development plan goes through. And after one round in April, in which there were a number of amendments proposed that would benefit O'Connor, he sends an email saying, I'm 110% that what the councillors vote through is going to be way better than what's in that plan, or paraphrasing slightly.
Mm-hmm.
How he was so confident of that, I'll let people
Yeah.
determine for themselves. It goes on like this. There was another vote then in September of that year, during which the chief executive actually said in the meeting, I'm getting concerned here because councillors are echoing the language used by a certain property developer who emailed me this morning. Well, correspondence we got shows that that was Cathal O'Connor saying,
Gosh.
you know, you want to stop housing, but I'm not going to.
So he's
I'm
getting
not
his
going to.
tentacles into each of the
Yeah.
councillors and the way that they're communicating also.
Well, they certainly agree with his point of view that, you know, these plans should be developer led.
Mhm.
And one of the final pieces of correspondence we ended up looking at, which was sent in December of last year, which was like after he'd been charged with this assault, he sent an email to the chief exec and said, look, in an ideal world, it wouldn't be developer led, but we're not living in an ideal world. So you need to hand over the reins to people like me because we can deliver housing, you know?
Gosh.
And he's due to begin his prison sentence in July.
Right.
So.
And how do we know how long his prison sentence?
I think he got a couple of years anyway.
For assaulting teenagers.
Yeah, it was pretty serious.
Yeah.
You know. So that is planning.
So that's a
a
snippet
glimpse into the
yeah,
world
exactly.
of planning and development in Sligo. But I felt quite bad for the chief executive. Like,
Yeah.
it's quite intimidating getting those kinds of messages, I would say, if you're
Yeah.
in that position particularly from somebody who's been charged
Yes.
with a crime
For
that's
assault.
serious, you know?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Did you have another story or just that one for this?
No, that's it for
That's
today.
it. Okay,
No.
perfect. Right. So now we'll come back around again to introducing the People's Forum on peace and neutrality.
Yeah,
So,
explain what that is and why it's important to have it.
yeah, so I suppose it kind of goes back to as we mentioned in the earlier segment, in 2023, so just over a year and a few months into the war in Ukraine, the government basically of the day was very adamant that Ireland would basically abandon its neutrality. We would follow in the footsteps of Finland and Sweden, who were in the process of abandoning their neutrality and joining NATO. And the Irish government, as you said, they had said, maybe we'd have a citizens' assembly. And then they kind of thought better go against that because we'd actually get the wrong answer. The answer we're looking for is no to neutrality and yes to cozying up to NATO. So they had the consultative forum that you mentioned, which was stacked with NATO talking heads. And that was 3 years ago. And basically the outcome of that, the report from Dame Richardson's report, or conclusions were that we should get rid of the triple lock. And here we are 3 years later, and we still haven't actually had a formal process of consultation. There was an attempt by the Soc Dems to bring a motion forward last year where we would have a plebiscite on the question of the triple lock, and that was voted down in the Doyle by the government. So no, the people have never actually been consulted. Then over the past year, there was a people-led initiative known as the Neutrality Roadshow. I was involved in it. A number of others were as well. And we went around Ireland, speaking to people in different communities, towns and villages about the triple lock, about neutrality. And that led to the different motions that were passed at council level were usually because people in the areas where we'd visited had decided that they should push their councils to do something to kind of build pressure from below.
Yeah.
And I suppose it's kind of in that frame of building pressure that a group of us came together, a broad-based group of people who've been involved in neutrality questions for years, some people for decades. And we decided that we should have our own forum, so the People's Forum on peace and neutrality. And we invited, real experts in their fields from across different, it wasn't just kind of this left-leaning forum. It was actually a broad-based political spectrum of people.
Sure.
And we had very much a discussion on neutrality from different standpoints of facts and evidence-based research. So we had one on neutrality and the law, for example. So we heard from legal experts on what the law has to say on neutrality, both on an Irish level and international level. We had a discussion on neutrality and diplomacy. So we actually heard from a former Irish diplomat, Philip McDonough, and he spoke, very much about the importance of diplomacy, of peace negotiations, of mediation. We also had experts come over from Brussels and London who spoke about the arms trade. And we had a keynote speech from Andrew Feinstein, who's
He's great.
He's fantastic.
Yeah.
He's a former ANC member of parliament from South Africa, and he's a lifelong researcher, writer, advocate, who's been looking at corruption in the arms trade.
Sure.
And he basically gave us a warning, like Ireland is at the beginning of this. He was like, any country I have seen that has become involved, that is invited in the arms trade, has become, the corruption that goes with the arms trade, it seeps into every single aspect of society. So he gave us a stark warning.
Sure.
And we also had former TD and MEP Claire Daly, who spoke about her time in Europe. She spoke about European militarisation. And then we had a finale speech by our former president, Michael D. Higgins.
Yes.
So we were absolutely delighted with, the kind of broad base of investigator, researchers, former diplomat, former TD, former MEP, president.
It was interesting people that came along.
Yeah, so we had,
know.
and then we had a full house. It was covered in the media. And so, so the section that's coming after this is, some snippets of the people that were at the forum, sharing their thoughts on why they were in Ireland, what they thought of the forum, and we hope you enjoy it.
Yeah, I mean, look at it. It's a real honour for me to be part of the event. I think it's incredibly necessary. If you like, it's the antidote to the government's so-called consultative forum on international security policy, which wasn't consultative or a forum for that matter. It was an orchestrated assault on our position of neutrality, which they have been undermining for decades, but really used the war in Ukraine to launch a full frontal assault on that. And I think given that that event was festooned with so-called experts who are really just hired hands for the security industry, Europhiles and so on, all of the alternative voices for peace and diplomacy were absent. So we're here to have a real discussion of the alternatives, the real policies that have made Ireland safe and our place in the world. Because, the government say things like, oh, well, neutrality, we can't stand by and do nothing. But when did Irish people ever do nothing? We've never done that. We've been, since the foundation of the state, people who've gone out, supported the rights of self-determination, the equality of nations. And as a result of that forward internationalist outlook, standing up for the rule of law, for the peaceable resolution of conflict, we've been able to punch well above our weight. And obviously what's under attack here now is to try and really batter away at the last vestiges of our neutrality and bring us firmly into the centre of European defence at a time when Europe is arming and escalating militarisation in an incredibly dangerous way. So we're going to touch on all of those issues, I think, to frame the attack on Irish neutrality very much in the context of what's going on at EU level, and to raise the prospect that what we had and our independent foreign policy is the thing that's kept us safe and that we need to preserve more than anything.
There was a story a few months ago about how the European people needed to be educated about the prospect of a coming war in Europe, even though it was a war that Europe would probably lose. So What do you understand to be the kind of the preparations that are?
Well, I mean, there's no doubt about it. There are countries in Europe which are already behaving as if they were in the throes of a military conflict. Obviously, no country or no group of countries is going to agree to the expenditure of billions of euros of public money into the pockets of the arms industry unless they're terrified into that, unless there's a bad guy and an enemy. And of course, Russia's invasion of Ukraine gave them that opportunity to accelerate that process. But the problem is in the tactics being employed by the European Union in aggressively confronting Russia is dangerous. So I wouldn't rule it out at all, not because I believe the Russians are coming, they're not, but because the Europeans are engaging in very provocative action designed at the war continuing in Ukraine. We've had the Operation Irene, for example. The reason which our ministers tell us they deeply regret the triple knock is preventing us from participating in. But this mission now is a deliberate provocation on Russia. It's to allow the European Union follow and board and search Russian shadow fleet, civilian vessels. It's against maritime law. Russia have seen it as an act of hostility, and we want our men and women in their defence forces to be part of something like that. It's lunacy, but these actions will have consequences. So I think it's very dangerous. You know, World War I and World War II, you could argue nobody thought they were going to necessarily happen or plan them. But when you escalate militarisation and you put your chest out to your neighbour and start talking big talk, things can happen. So yeah, I think, you know, in that environment, the answer isn't to militarise more. That just makes the prospect of war more likely. It's much more to talk it down, to talk about peace, to talk about the peaceable resolution of conflict, to sit down on the continent of Europe with our neighbours in the European Union and indeed in Russia as well. So yeah, I think it's a really important part of this discussion.
Hi, my name's Ken Regaly. I'm based in London. I'm here for the People's Forum on Peace and Neutrality, coming from Transition Security Project, which is a centre for research and policy that works between the US and Britain. And we look at militarisation and its impacts on economies, climate and geopolitics. And today I was here to talk about this context of militarisation and the impacts it has on our economies, also right down to the workplace level, how it's changing the nature of work in automotive sector, tech and universities, and then also thinking about its climate impacts as well. And one of the core things that I was here to talk about was about this so-called defence dividend that we're being promised across European countries. So in countries like Britain, it's particularly important for politicians to sell this lie that military spending is going to create lots of jobs and produce economic growth, because that's how they can get public support. If you look at the polls, basically the public support it if they think it's going to produce jobs, but if they think it's going to cause cuts to public services, to spending on other priorities, they're less keen on increasing military spending. And I really just broke down the numbers a little bit to think about what actually happens when you increase military spending, which is that the relationship between military spending and jobs is not strong in both Britain and in the US. If you look at the fact that budgets have actually increased since the Cold War period in real terms, the number of jobs in the military industry has gone down significantly. If you compare to government spending on other sectors, if you're thinking about health, education, those kind of key priorities, military spending produces far fewer jobs than equivalent spending on public services. It also produces very little in the way of economic growth, and that's something that's admitted by the IMF, by the RAND Corporation, bodies that you would not expect to really be admitting such things. And then I also went into the climate impact. So thinking about the emissions produced by this massive NATO spending increase across Europe, it will, over the next 10 years, produce the equivalent of the carbon footprint of Brazil. So a massive climate burden from the process of militarisation. And finally, just to think about what it's doing to workplaces. While it does little to the national economy, the effects of militarisation are felt by people working in car companies who are now being told, for instance, in Germany, their employer might move to partnering with an Israeli state-owned arms company, or you're looking at universities where researchers are having their research used for the research and development work that's done for free by universities on behalf of arms companies, or even to train people to work in arms companies. It's having a profound impact in that way as well.
It's probably an obvious question, but who does benefit?
Well, that's something that we're really keen to break down today at the forum, which is that we're told that it's this great initiative for jobs and for workers, for economic growth. But the reality is that military spending has a key beneficiary, and that's the shareholders of arms companies. So in the Anglo-American context, those shareholders are big institutional investors, so BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street. And what you see is that because the arms companies get so much support from governments, they're obviously receiving government contracts, their money comes from governments, they're also getting direct subsidies as well. So their research and development costs are paid for on their behalf by the taxpayer. Often in the case of BAE Systems, about 85% of its research and development costs are paid for on its behalf. And that means that they're able to make reliable and steady profits, which then flow out in the form of payouts to shareholders, dividends, share buybacks. So again, in the Anglo-American context, what happens when you look at the financial data is basically that these companies, the British and American arms companies, they pay out to their shareholders at a higher rate than the rest of the stock market index, so that they're able to turn this government spending into a source of private profit.
I'm Jenny Stevens, Professor of Climate Justice at Maynooth University, and I'm also the co-convener of the Climate Justice Universities Union, which is an international collective advocating to resist corporate capture of higher education and reclaim higher education as critical infrastructure for a more peaceful and just healthy future. So why neutrality and peace is central to climate justice principles has to do with the influence of defense tech and fossil fuel industry and the corporatization of our society, in which profit-making and extractive practices and policies have been normalized with and really connected with these narratives that are very industry-friendly, that has infiltrated our society and perpetuating fossil fuel use. For a climate just future, we know that the number one thing that society has to do is phase out fossil fuels. And with increased militarization and the threat here in Ireland with the removal of the triple lock, is just one more mechanism to perpetuate fossil fuels. And the defense tech industry is much more powerful behind the scenes than many of us realize, including in our universities. And we are currently here in Ireland concerned about Research Ireland's approach and the government's funding for research and for the universities that is very much oriented toward corporate interests and industry R&D rather than all the research and learning that is needed to transition society toward a more just and healthy future.
So, Bhriain, you spoke here last night, and you've just been saying here we need some political ambition. Tell me about that.
Yeah, well, the analysis we're getting, and there's tremendous expertise around at this People's Forum, is incredibly, in a way, encouraging because it's laying out the scenario. But I think we have a big challenge to kind of transform this analysis into strategy of engagement, of the citizens. Everyone I've talked to since I've been back in Ireland are expecting there's going to be a referendum about this question. But we know there isn't going to be a referendum. There is actually a very perverse, undemocratic maneuver going on by the current coalition to actually, with a technical approach and amendment of the bill to kind of get the triple lock off the Irish political agenda. So I feel we do really need to be very ambitious to actually find a way to stop this. Really, this is, and maybe we only have 2 months or 6 months. This is what nobody knows also.
Right.
So there is no accountability. And we have
keeping us guessing.
Yes, keeping us guessing. And then we also have to prepare for the longer term. And this is not just an Irish question. This is about how the European continent is going to continue to define the issues of sovereignty. And we should not get into a situation already willingly where we're actually answerable to the big powers of Europe without any kind of accountability on their part. So I think we're on a very, very, what shall I say, a very negative
trajectory.
Yeah. A very negative trajectory, whereas we actually should be strongly indicating among ourselves on the Irish political agenda, but also to Europe, that Irish sovereignty and neutrality is not for sale. And our people have defended it since whenever, and we're going to continue to defend it.
And do you think that that message would be heard in Europe, and that we'd have friends in Europe if the Irish people pursue that more strongly?
Well, we have friends in Europe, but we have a big problem also in Europe. We have never had, in the progressive forces and in the left, even in the construction of the new Europe, we've never had a proper assessment of what the Second World War and its ending was all about. It was really, it created this mist that on the one hand we're going to work for peace, we won't kill each other anymore. On the other hand, we will enlarge, enhance, and create the coal and steel community. We will be an economic juggernaut as Europe, and we'll all live very happily. Of course, we didn't realise, or a lot of people didn't realise, though the Irish people did, because at least we subjected our entry into Europe to several referenda. On the other hand, we did not actually internalise that this is about a new imperialist politics within Europe and between Europe and the rest of the world, and between Ireland and Europe. We have to renegotiate our relations. We really have, and know that we have a role in it. I think that's the other really important thing. A lot of people in Ireland have reached a point where they're losing faith in the formal democratic process, and with good reason, because it's not answering to their daily reality. And that's something that kind of, in a way, the triple lock for Ireland, I think, is like Gaza for the rest of the world. The triple lock in Ireland is actually touching the very nerve core of our identity as a people, our responsibility for ourselves, and our responsibility to the rest of the world. As Gaza is telling us, Gaza is explaining to us the world we're living in, and the people, the Palestinian people, are showing us how to engage. They're showing us how to engage. They have insisted on staying where they are and holding to their right to the Palestinian land and to self-determination as a people. So I think there's a parallel to be made there.
How's it going? John Maguire. You've just chaired a session this morning in the Peace and Neutrality Forum. I wonder, can you tell us, it was brilliant, wasn't it?
It really was. I mean, my head is a bit full of it now, and I was in this kind of second order mind thinking about how things would go. But I learned so much. And the wonderful thing at the end was that Philip McDonough, former Irish ambassador and diplomat, just said at the end of it to Karen Devine, they're both connected to DCU, and Philip said, "You're giving me details on things I just had a sense of before." So I mean, the synergy even between our speakers is wonderful. But Philip McDonough, who has, in the last couple of years, has been particularly calling for genuine diplomacy and a global perspective. For example, on his Cassandra Voices podcast, You gave us a wonderful account of the necessary elements in genuine diplomacy, how you need to start with fundamental values, have a good political horizon, and really he gave us such a sense of possibility and something to puncture the despair that it's so easy to feel these days.
At the same time, he gave us a sense that things have gotten worse.
Oh, absolutely. I think he has no doubt that we are in crises, as he quoted the Pope.
Morally, structurally, financially,
absolutely.
The things that he came up with, as it were.
But Harry, I think this is the real skill of the genuine diplomat, that they can see where we are and how things are, and they don't give up. They just say, we're human, we need something that, as Philip has said in another of his podcasts, we need to create a future that works for all the sides, all the parties, in any situation. So I find that the realism of his account of what's wrong, but the encouragement of his refusing to give up and say there's a human future there that's got to be founded in human values. And then, of course, Karen Devine, who has done sterling work, unique work, on actually finding out what people do believe about neutrality, not what the government or the military-industrial complex say they believe. She has shown that over the whole 4 decades and more of opinion polls, there has been a solid commitment to a sense of independence, abhorrence of war, and a commitment to genuine peacekeeping. Irish people know what neutrality is like, and the people suffering war around the planet, they know what neutrality is about. And really, we've such an encouragement today in, as you say, dreadful situations to gather our hope, gather our resources, and stand practically for our values.
She showed the constant of the Irish people's commitment to Irish neutrality, but also, again, that at the level of the state and at the level of international institutions, a degradation, including really kind of the abandonment of the Irish peacekeeping tradition.
Well, that's it, and of the tradition and of the practice of Irish peacekeeping. And she also, of course, very courageously documented how the space for talking about these things within the academy, within our university, is being, the way she put it, almost ruthlessly closed down. So yes, there's an abandonment of a practice, and there's an abandonment of the philosophy that informs that practice.
Hi, my name is Karen Devine. I'm a lecturer in European Union politics and Irish foreign policy and gender, race, class and politics at Dublin City University. And I was here today at the forum to talk about how 4 in 5 people in Ireland consistently, over 45 years of opinion polls, 21 of them from 1981 through to basically February of 2026 this year, 4 in 5 people in Ireland have said they support Irish neutrality. And that neutrality is active, positive neutrality. So it means not getting involved in wars, not getting involved in other states' wars, impartiality, not taking sides, and independence. And that independence is making sure we don't get dragged into other big power conflicts. And so this is consistent. But the problem is the government, even though we live in a democracy, is determined to ignore that fact. And the government is determined to abolish the triple lock, which will end effectively our neutrality. And the government is hell-bent on pushing Ireland into deeper European defence integration. And they've already decided, Micheál Martin announced this in 2022, we're going to stop UN peacekeeping, and our troops are going to be taken off those missions, and they're going to be put into a standing EU army, which is called the Rapid Deployment Capacity. Another word for it is the new EU battle group. And it's against the wishes of the Irish people, and it's so clear. So we are questioning the democratic credentials of not only this government, but actually the EU as an organisation itself, whether it really is devoted to the ideals of peace, or whether it is actually trying to rival the military-industrial complex, which is defence spending and support of military spending, arms industry in Europe, just to rival the US and to become this big power. And it's just the opposite of what the Irish people are about.
Yeah, I think the most interesting thing about your very interesting talk was the combination of a kind of a pretty unwavering position from the Irish people and a very definite trajectory for the Irish government. You know, that a direction of change that isn't just about kind of what it's saying or its postures, but its actual actions, including, in a larger context, the decline of kind of peacekeeping as the central motif of Irish military participation.
Yeah, so I mean, Micheál Martin announced in Doyle era, and so the reason why Ireland no longer is going to participate, or at least we cease participation in UNDOF, which was a UN peacekeeping operation, is because, now he used the words based on military advice, but the government solicits this advice from the Irish Defence Forces and from the EU level. So the government wants this to say what the government wants it to say. And so we've stopped UNDOF, and those troops that were in UNDOF have now been seconded to the EU standing army called the Rapid Deployment Capacity. Yeah, and although at the time of the then Chief of Staff of the Irish Defence Forces, Lieutenant General Sean Clancy, did say that Irish UN peacekeeping is about our values as a nation, and that Irish people are really proud of it. He's talking in the past tense. He's now the chairperson of the EU Military Committee, and he said as part of his chairmanship of that committee that the decision-making demands consensus on NATO objectives, on NATO armament, and he said we must keep up with our capabilities and our spending on militarism in order to achieve parity with NATO member states. So in practice, Ireland is a member of NATO, but through the back door, and the government won't admit it to the people, but it's a fait accompli, which is the French phrase for it's a done deal, it's already been in place. And so once the government can abolish the triple lock, and Helen McEntee, who's the new Minister for Defence, said that she will abolish it in the next couple of weeks, it means that Irish troops can be sent into war fighting. They can be basically alongside the Ukrainian armed forces, putting Ireland in direct conflict at war with Russia. So we're now part of the big power empire of militarism, imperialism, and as a small post-colonial nation who struggled for centuries to retain our identity and to say we're not going to be part of violence on others. We don't want to colonize other states. We don't want to conquer other states. We're going to be part of that machinery, swallowed up. And the voice that Ireland has on the international stage, and I've seen this through research, talking to retired and current ambassadors, through my students' work on their theses. I have seen it when I have spoken at the Doyle, and deputy ambassadors have contacted me and asked me to speak to a room full of 30 other deputy ambassadors. They've come up to me from different countries, different continents around the world, going, we are so shocked at what the Irish government are doing. Irish neutrality is so important to us as small post-colonial nations, which most of the states in the UN are, and we really want you to keep your neutrality profile, and we really hope that the people of Ireland will be able to intercede and stop their government from doing this, because it's against the interests of not only the Irish people, but of humanity, of peace, and actually of the environment and the future of our planet going forward. It's actually that big.
I'm going to quote Harry here, and I'm going to say, we'll call it a podcast.
Yes.
Thank you so
very
much
for
listening to us, and we'll catch you next time.
Yeah, take care.
Take care, guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye.